So there was a post by a guy who is the lead, or a girl, I don't know, but a lead character designer at Firewalk for Concord. So lead character designer on Concord. And of course, no bullying. I'm not saying anybody goes and like pursues this person or anything, but like this is somebody that worked on Concord from the very, very beginning, okay? And they said today Fireworks Studios, or Firewalk, I always want to say work, it's because it's more exciting, launched Play Concord. The game has been in development for around 8 years, and I've been there for almost 5. We don't get a lot of launch days in our careers, so today is special for a ton of reasons. Oblige me some good vibes today. A big reason is being invited into a position of creative trust on a new experience. Obviously, it's a group effort, and having a seat at the table with others who inspire you and push you to do your best is a tremendous privilege. That trust they gave, or that trust gave the game so much identity, gave it something. More personally, I feel so lucky to have had another run at game design with my long-term friend and colleagues, and then list some of those other coworkers. Concord has so much humanity and depth to it. I don't even know what the hell that means. I really hope people give it a shot. Insanely proud of the game. We're strapped in and ready to push it for years to come. Not sure if you'll get the money to do that, but time will tell. But with this, my takeaway is like 8 freaking years. 8 years! That's crazy. And it's the craziness of live service games where somebody can work on a game for almost a decade and it can just totally flop. Like, it's unbelievable that anybody would spend that much time. Because rewind the clocks 8 years. What happened 8 years ago? Does anybody remember? What's a big game that launched roughly 8 years ago and that might have inspired this game 8 years ago? Overwatch. Yeah, sure was. Dude, I saw somebody call this Underwatch and I died laughing. May 3rd, 2016. They say this has been in the works for 8 years. So it's like they played Overwatch and we're like, oh, we could make one of those, and then started working on it. Now, I don't know what they mean by it's been in the works for 8 years. Does that mean the first time somebody said, hey, we should make a game was 8 years ago? I don't know. Does that mean they made the team 8 years? I don't know, because they're very, very vague about it. But they're openly saying it took them 8 years to put this together. So I don't think it's a coincidence that those timelines line up in that way. This isn't a Lawbreakers situation. Lawbreakers, they put the game together and they were working on it before Overwatch was announced. So there is no doubt. Can we get MS Paint? Sure, I can MS Paint this up. I'll MS Paint this bitch. Look at this. So with like Overwatch, we'll just say Overwatch is like the gold, okay? Released here. Actually, to make it easier, let's say it was in development here, released here, okay? Lawbreakers was something like this. They were working on it for a while before it was announced, and then it released. But because of this gap, everybody just was like, oh, it's Overwatch. Even though everything they did for Lawbreakers was done well before the announcement and release of Overwatch, that's all anybody could take away from it. Concord, though, is straight up, right as Overwatch comes out, they start working on it. It takes 8 years and then it comes out. And that's why, like, I struggle to feel truly bad, because at any point along this road, they could have said, hey, maybe we shouldn't. And if they had talked to anybody who was being honest with them, they would have seen that. For obvious reasons, I can't be specific, okay? But I've done consultant work on games. I actively do consultant work on games. People and studios, big and small, will like actually pay me to go and give them feedback, okay? Like they could be 2, 3, 4 years out from launch, and they'll pay people like me or other critics to come in and tell them what we see ahead of time. So we get to play the game or hear their pitch or whatever and tell them like, I really don't think this is gonna go over well. Yeah, I'm guessing you didn't consult on Suicide Squad? No, I did not. I know somebody that did give them feedback. I don't know if they were like consultants, but I do know somebody that saw it well ahead of time, and yeah. But in that case, at least they told me in private was that they did not have great feedback, but none of their feedback was heated, or as Michael says, was take-headed of. So I like, it's the other thing to remember with consultants. Just because somebody consultates on a game does not mean that their feedback will be taken and like used, right? Like I could hire a consultant to give me feedback on a YouTube video I'm about to launch, but their feedback could be just like, I don't know, I think it'd be really trippy and cool if you made everything black and white and then also blurred the whole video. That could be their feedback. Doesn't mean I'm gonna take it. They consulted, but doesn't mean I'm going to take the recommendations. And so you have to be careful when looking at like consultancy stuff, because sometimes they do absolutely take the feedback and other times they do not. But with all this said, like if they had hired actual consultants or just brought in regular gamers, had them sign an NDA, I don't care, and then give feedback at any point along this road, the feedback, I guarantee you, would have been, it seems like another Overwatch clone, and I just don't think it does enough to really stand out. I just don't see this working out. And that's tough feedback to give. It really is. Like imagine if your friend asks you, I guess not really a friend, but imagine if somebody you know or just you're hired to come in and give feedback on something somebody's poured their heart and soul into for close to a decade, and your feedback is, yeah, this isn't gonna work. This is a waste. That's tough. Imagine like your friend has been working on a novel for years and years and years, and then you have to tell them like, no, this isn't gonna work. It's tough, but that's literally what a consultant is being hired for. And I've consulted on some games that are still years away that look really sick and I think are gonna be amazing. And I've consulted on some other stuff that was hot dog garbage and slop, and you know, I put it maybe a little bit more PC than that, but I mean, we'll see what happens with those. One of the ones I was asked to talk about or asked to look at was eventually canceled, and it was probably for the best. But anyway, all of this to say, it can be tough to be the quote unquote bad guy when talking about these games. But at the end of the day, my job is to talk about video games and share my thoughts on them. And sometimes I piss off people because I have a bad take, or because I have a niche take, or whatever. You know, like the Stalker fans were not too happy that I said that demo I played was a whole lot of garbage. But I'm going to tell you what I think, even if it makes people upset. And that's all you can really do. You know, like my guarantee to you guys is I'll tell you what I actually think. And if that means that I tear Concord apart, because I think it's just a bit of it's a game that encapsulates everything wrong with PlayStation's current strategy. And I think that that's more than anything why a lot of people are reveling. And I mean, you watch on social media, it seems like people are really celebrating the collapse of the game. And it's just come out. I mean, we'll see if it actually fully collapses, but it seems like just nobody's interested. It's total radio silence on it. But I think the reason that a lot of people are like really reveling in it is because it perfectly encapsulates everything that's wrong with PlayStation, and it's more of a symbol than anything else. The game is solid, but like even being solid as a free-to-play game, it still, I don't think, would be worth really spending a lot of time, because it's another 5v5 hero shooter. And if it launched 6, 7, 8, 9 years ago, maybe it could pop off, but it's literally launching like a decade too late. I just think it's a tale as old as time, and unfortunately some of these executives have to learn the lesson the hard way. But it's like people were joking about where they're like, oh yeah, no, they're gonna launch this, and then PlayStation executives are gonna be baffled nobody's playing, because they're like, wait, we spent $250 million on this. How could people not love it? And I think, you know, honestly, games like Black Myth, games like Space Marine 2, games like Pal World, games like Helldivers, those are popping off because I think they just go back to like that 360 era of gaming, at least in terms of feel, where it's not trying to be built to like teach you a lesson or to lecture you about anything. They're not trying to make I forget who initially, I think it was some comedian, but they're like, what is it with media nowadays? Not being entertaining, but being important. You know, like so many of these movies nowadays, it's not really about whether or not it's just fun to engage with or watch or play. It's always about how important like the message or whatever is. And it's just, I think people are just kind of sick of it. They're like, I want to play a game like Black Myth Wukong where I play as like a monkey beating up animals and using crazy magical abilities that look beautiful on screen. And yeah, it's not like a 10 out of 10 masterpiece. It's got some problems, but it's just a fun game. Same with like Space Marine 2. When you guys finally play that, it plays very similar to like a 360 game. And I don't think that's a bad thing. I do think critics are going to be pissy about it. I think you'll see some reviews that come out and be like, oh, the outdated design of the levels finds the game feeling much more linear and less exciting and engaging than it could have been, which could all be very, very fair. But did you have fun? And I think people will have a lot of fun. And that's why I think it's so great to see that there are other huge studios that are starting to get some of these big developers a little nervous, like Pearl Abyss from Korea working on Crimson Desert, or Game Science from China working on Black Myth Wukong. If there's other studios that are willing to come in and pour hundreds of millions of dollars into these games, into these projects that are just solid games, first and foremost, I think that gives a little bit more competition and maybe kicks them in the teeth so that they start actually focusing on what gamers really, really want. Because the thing with Concord, the thing with Suicide Squad, games like this, which are even Saints Row Reboot, all of those, if you asked any average gamer that actively engages with video game discourse, YouTubers, streamers, that type of thing, they all could have told you that this is how the story would end. And I think they knew that, but I don't think they cared because the game was important, because they were trying to evolve it for a modern audience, for the next generation of gamers or what have you, whatever the excuse was. They actively developed a game that they knew the core of the gaming community would not like, but they thought that they would get away with it because the new generation of gamers would support them. And they just didn't. They didn't show up because it's kind of a myth that there's a modern audience. You know, in my opinion, as far as I can tell, games that are being built for modern audiences flop because there doesn't seem to be a modern audience. Gamers are gamers. You know, it's not like there's millions of people sitting on the sidelines waiting to play a game like Saints Row Reboot. They didn't show up. They didn't buy it. They weren't interested. And I think it's because they don't really exist. I think gamers are just gamers. And so long as developers are creating games with contempt at the core, I don't think they'll find any success. Hopefully this is the first step in a new direction as all these games come out and start to flop and show that this just doesn't work. You'll start to see them looking at games like a Pal World, like Helldivers, like Black Myth Wukong, and even Baldur's Gate 3. And hopefully they start to realize, yeah, on paper, we could technically make a ton more money if we did it this way, this way, this way, this way, and everything was live service, whatever. But the odds of that working are very, very low. You know, very, very low. It's almost like if you, I really think what they're doing is they look at it like this. Live service games are kind of like this. You know, the really successful ones make insane amounts of money. Just insane. The top 1% makes stupid amounts of money. The problem is really more likely if this is the break-even point, okay? Most live service games are like this. So they lose money as long as they're under that break-even point. But once they cross it, they're making ridiculous amounts of money. So it's very much pass-fail. Like if you pass, you're printing money. If you fail, you lost a ton. And a lot of executives thought, well, look at how much money we could make up here. That's amazing. We should pursue that. We should do that with all of our big IP. But now they have like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 huge flops that have just hemorrhaged money. And they're like, what's going wrong? Whereas a game like Black Myth Wukong or one of these more standard traditional games, they might start over here, but they start to really pick up profitability much, much faster. Much sooner, because they're not making, they're not dealing with server infrastructure costs. They're not having to spend 8 years developing a game that you can see all of in about 35 minutes, So I just hope we go back to this meta, which worked for so long. And as long as gamers keep voting with their wallets and not buying this stuff, they'll get the message. You know, it's like I saw people in chat talking about the cancellation of the Acolyte. Remember, they weren't canceling the Acolyte because like there was any sort of feedback over the writing or the cast or whatever. They canceled it because it wasn't making money, and it was clear that the second season would cost probably $200 million and not make a penny. Pretty clear. That's what it was. So they canceled it. Like these corporations, they only really care about the bottom line at the end of the day, which some people freak out about that. I actually celebrate it because it means that they're easy to push around and to predict as well. Because if games like Concord are losing hundreds of millions of dollars, that doesn't work and they have to stop it. So very clearly, if you vote with your wallet, there will be a more positive outcome. So having said all of that, I don't really know what else to say. I think just the age of the crappy live service games is hopefully slowing down as a lot more of these come out, and we'll see kind of where they end up, where they transition. I think it's pretty clear Sony's approach is to get this stuff out the door and then reset, which I don't think is a bad strategy. I'm still surprised that they totally canceled the Last of Us online multiplayer game, but that might have also been because they're going to tie it into the whatever like their next game is. People kind of sleep on that, but Naughty Dog for a long time, they would make games and then they'd like lump in the multiplayer mode in with it. So they might be doing something like that with their next title. I don't know, but I was surprised that they just totally canned that. But anything else that was close to release, like Concord, Helldivers, those games, and the Horizon game that they've spent, that like those are going to actually release, and they're hoping that they find some success there. And I think those, you know, I think the Horizon game actually does stand a chance. We do joke with Joel Raptor all the time. I mean, he's a big Horizon fan, and on the podcast we're always like, yeah, it sucks though. You know, we tease him a bit, but I actually do think that could find some success if they really nail that initial launch. But they're a very talented group of guys and gals over there. They've spent years working on that, so I think we're getting there. But time will tell. They're probably announcing it and revealing it next year, maybe even at Tokyo Game Show with the PS5 Pro. We see it, but we should be seeing it soon. Chinsas on Twitch, I think that's what your name is. Why are you keep kicking the Concord devs? I thought you only go after lazy and greedy devs. Concord is a polished, honest product. Why go after Firewalk just because they're not selling well? You're not contributing anything this way. You just monetize hate. So I think that there's a flaw in your assumptions at the outset. You say, why go after Firewalk just because they're not selling well? That's not what we're doing. Okay. Maybe it is sarcasm. I don't know, but I do think that there probably are people that feel that way, which is why I'll address it. I'm not going after Concord just because it's selling poorly. For all I know, on PlayStation, it could be selling tremendously well. I don't know. We don't know PlayStation numbers. The reason I talk about Concord is because I just look at the game. We played the game on stream. We play it in videos and stuff. We've tried it. And it just frankly is a lackluster game that sure is a bit polished, like graphically, but we've even run into bugs and serious content issues actively while playing it. Some of the stuff that we pointed out, that I pointed out in my videos, ended up being fixed by the time the game launched. One of the big sticking points that I was frustrated with was that there was no penalty system for people leaving matches early. Guess what they added when the game came out? They added a penalty system for people that left the game early. So holding devs' feet to the fire can actually improve the game. But at the end of the day, when we look at a game like Concord, is it worth $40? No, just no. Every other peer in its genre is free to play, has better quality of life options. Marvel Rivals is a fantastic example of a game that is free to play and is doing, in my view, a lot of things in a much more impressive way. And you can't really like counter it because you can do one-to-one feature comparisons and it's just more impressive. So I would agree that there's some people that are just hating on Concord for the sake of hating it. There are some people that are just hating on it because they think the character designs are ugly or whatever. And those people, I would agree, they are they're bashing the game for bad reasons. Totally agree with that. But that doesn't mean that that's what we're doing here. You know, it's why for all these different types of games that we've talked about, like Suicide Squad, even there's in the group of people that are against a game or that dislike a game, there's some people that dislike it for terrible reasons. And then there's other people that dislike it for very valid reasons. For like Suicide Squad, there were some people that hated it purely because they didn't think that the outfits for Harley Quinn were sexy enough at launch. I actually saw people on X talking about that and saying as much. That's a bad reason to hate the game, okay? If that's the only reason you don't like Suicide Squad, that's stupid. Okay, that's just stupid. However, to then conclude by cherry picking that everybody that dislikes the game is like an incel, that's unfair. And you ignore the actual critiques and criticisms of the people that are critiquing the game in good faith and are actually evaluating what it is. You know, based comment. Yeah. But they're not wrong though. Yeah, it's what drives me crazy is from my perspective, my job is not to coddle devs or publishers or whatever. It's why I've done stuff with like Ubisoft, for example. And I point to them because they're an example, actually, in my view, of a company that handles criticism surprisingly well, usually. But like I've done reviews with them. I've done all sorts of stuff with them. And I called their last big Assassin's Creed game, I called it a travesty of open world design. I thought it was atrocious. I thought it was horrifying. It was so bad. And it was so disappointing considering the last game they did was AC Origins, which granted set in ancient Egypt. I love it dearly. I'm a little biased because it's ancient Egypt. I love ancient Egypt and I loved Origins in a lot of ways. And then they did that. And I thought it was just, I've done like a 3-hour video. You've heard me ramble about it, okay? I'm not a huge fan of
Assassin's Creed Valhalla.
And despite me tearing the game apart for many reasons, Ubisoft will still contact me. They'll still ask me if I want to try games like Star Wars Outlaws early and check it out. Even though I'm like a well-known critic in those circles, they still will take that feedback and work with it. Now, because the way these games are made, if you critique a game in 2020, you probably don't see the results. Even if they go, you're right, we're going to make changes, you probably don't see the effect of those changes for 5, 6, 7 years, just because of how that works. It takes so long to make these games. But you can at least critique something and they'll take that constructive criticism and work with it. But that's why, like, you'll notice for something like AC Shadows, when I'm talking about that game, I'm not like centering on, like, I don't even know if it counts as political discourse, but I'm not talking about like the woke narrative of Yasuke being a samurai, whatever. Because if you don't want to play the game for that, cool, that's fine. You can not play a game for any reasons. Nobody's forcing you to buy it. But if I'm going to critique a game, I want to critique the game, the package. And if the game is really good, and then there's this one other thing over here that turns you off, okay, whatever, that's fine. But I'm going to critique the game and try to provide constructive feedback based on that. And again, as we said at the very top, sometimes it pisses people off. Sometimes people get upset that you're critiquing something like Concord and you think that that's unfair. And so be it. But at the very least, my commitment is that I'll tell you what I think of the game, positive or negative. And sometimes it'll be fair. Sometimes I'm sure it won't be, and I'll make a mistake, or I won't be rational in how I approach it. And in those moments, as is tradition in the internet, when I have a bad take, you guys get to make fun of me, because that's just how the internet works. It's beautiful. It really is beautiful. Yeah. Katie says, I think it's very respectful and professional of them to ask you, regardless of negative criticism. It means they're listening and trying to make better games. They don't get all whiny. I mean, I know some people, of course, villainize Ubisoft for various reasons, and many of those reasons are perhaps fair, but there are not many studios that I've been so hard on that still will like actively engage. Again, granted, I did call Todd Howard evil after 2018's Fallout 76. I didn't know how else to describe it. They knew the game was horrible. They still sold it to people and took their money. And so I called him evil. Mean? Yeah, could I have said it in like a more PC way or more like corporate friendly way? Probably, but that's what I said. And as a result, I think like for 5 years, I didn't get a single email returned. I never got any feedback, never heard a peep from Bethesda Softworks or Bethesda Game Studios. And then that changed once they were bought out from Xbox, because we could go to the Xbox people and figure that out. But as far as I can tell, like BGS put me on a blacklist after calling them out for Fallout 76. So like there are plenty of companies that don't respond to feedback that positively, but that's why I think it's just important to not be like, well, they're trying their hardest. It's like, okay, they're also like, there's no you tried money. Like, you know, it's like, oh, well, they tried their hardest. Oh, well, good thing now it goes from $70 and it drops to only $30 because it's try hard money. You know, it's like money's money. They're trying to sell you a product at the end of the day. Like if I'm buying a car and people are like, yeah, the car randomly breaks down on the highway, but the engineers really tried their hardest. You'd be like, I don't care. I'm buying a car. Who cares if they tried their hardest? You know, like I don't find that to be a very compelling counter, you know? Yeah, I worked hard for my money. Yeah, exactly. He took my thing.